artists shape culture at the end of the day. Artists have the ability to engage. They have the ability to make people think about things, and they have a larger platform than most.
Yo, what's up, Sam? How you doing, man?
I am good. I'm good. Out here in snowy ass Jackson, Wyoming, but it's good.
I know, man.
It feels nice to be out in the mountains right now. Got this
like
beard coming in extra.
Right there. Yeah. I know. Yeah. I was noticing that during the interview. I was like, look at this man. He looking like he belongs out in the forest.
Well, it's good. I mean, I got a nice little beards episode of the Beards today with our guest Jordan Kurland. Jordan, who we got on, man?
Jordan Kurland is the founding partner of Brilliant Corners Artist Management. I'm sure you guys have probably heard of some of his artists, Death Cab for Cutie, Postal Service, Toro Y Moi, Best Coast, Soccer Mommy, and the list goes on and on. So, today we talk about how to start a relationship with a manager. I get pitched for artists that want to be managed by me or people that I know. I want to work with artists as a manager. And sometimes you don't necessarily know the best way to be approached or to approach an artist. So we talked about that today explicitly. We haven't really discussed that before. And Jordan gives some great advice on that. In addition to that, Jordan was actually a part of the Entertainment Advisory Committee in 2012, 2016, and also worked with Joe Biden's campaign in 2020. So today we also talk about how music influences politics and what the Entertainment Advisory Committee actually does. They solve interesting problems like how to, they work with campaigns, for example, like the one in 2016, Hillary's, and it kind of helped answer the question, how do we get the music community out to vote? So that's a really interesting segment that's a little bit closer to the end. And I think there's a lot here. He's been in the industry for a long time. He's been successful for a fairly long time. So I'm always hearing from people that have been able to be in the industry for as long as he has is always great. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man. I really loved him talking about untapped revenue streams for artists and artist managers when it makes sense to sign with the label. Also really loved and grateful he was able to kind of dive deeper into the discovery and development stories of Toro Y Moi and Death Cab for Cutie. As well as just some tactics and tips on kind of where to put your focus as an emerging artist to drive growth. So tons of great stuff to cover in this episode. Special thanks to Jordan Kurland for coming on. Special thanks to Jordan #2 for being a great co-host. But most importantly, thank you to you guys for tuning in, for listening. If you haven't already, do want to encourage you to check out our Patreon. You just go to musicbusiness.com/community. You can join Discord. We're sharing different resources, different networking opportunities. So check it out if you haven't already. Without any further ado, Mr. Jordan Kurland.
Cool. Jordan, how's it doing, man? First of all, you got a great name. We spell it the same way too. So I've seen Jordyn. People have said Jordon. I like to say that it's the name of King. So welcome, Jordan.
I'm happy to be here, Jordan. And I'm happy to be named Jordan as well.
Yeah, right. It's an honor for the both of us.
Yes.
It's an honor for the both of us. Cool. So I guess just to get started, to kind of lay the groundwork for the success that you've had in the industry, one thing that I like to ask people that have kind of had success as long as you have is, what is the value set that's afforded you so much success for such a long period of time? And has that changed over time? And just kind of at a high level, what do you kind of attribute to it as it pertains to the values that you live your life by?
Well, I think the value set really is just about, working hard and being patient and being really true to your own vision about what and how you want to achieve something. I took a more circuitous path than most by moving to San Francisco when I was almost 23. I mean, I moved up here for a job. This was 1995, and the industry was even more concentrated in LA and New York and Nashville at that point than it is today. But I think because of that, it allowed me to really kind of figure out what type of artists I wanted to work with. I wasn't caught up in, this, band that 6 labels are trying to sign or playing at the Viper Room tonight in LA. And, I was a little bit outside of it. But I think, it's ultimately just, I say this a lot, there's a lot easier ways to make money than in the music business. So I do feel like the reason to be here is because you really want to be here and you really love music. And, to me, it's just, I want to work with artists that I really believe in. I want to work with artists that I can listen to 24 hours a day. and the value set is just, working hard and being upfront and honest with, with everyone you're working with. And, I know it might all sound like a little bit of cliche or simple, but it's just the reality of it. It's
Well,
not
I
an
asked
easy
you
business.
a kind of vague question on purpose to kind of get a more vague answer. I do think that the answer to that question has differed from guest to guest. So the simplicity of it might be because you lived through it, but I'm sure our guests will be, our audience will be appreciative to hear it.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, I think, in this business, probably in any business to some extent, but really in artist management, it's a lot of luck involved. I'm not going to sit here and say, I have, I've seen a lot of good people, in the music business who are no longer in the music business because they just didn't get the break, or maybe their tastes didn't line up with the moment in time and they had to hang it up, so to speak. I feel like for me, it was a struggle for a long time. I mean, it's not a long time in the context of my career now, but, when I was going through it, it felt like an eternity. And then I finally had the right opportunity at the right time to really show what I was capable of. And, so it is, what is that, saying? It's, luck meets preparation,
Yeah.
So I can't remember the rest of the statement of that saying, but yeah.
I love it.
All right.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of supporting artists, obviously a lot has changed throughout the years. With regards to over the course of recent years, and I know even obviously COVID has thrown a pretty interesting and big wrench, but when you think about independent artists, because I know you've worked with a broad range of artists, but when you think about upstart independent artists already have some level of existing traction, not necessarily starting from scratch, but they're actually trying to go from this point of not just necessarily having this as a hobby, but rather actually having this become a legitimate source of income and setting themselves up for potentially much more of a kind of bigger brand with their artistry. What do you think are some of the most important things for artists and managers to really focus on during those early stages?
I think it's, I think the most important thing is just getting it right. And, times have changed. Not to state the obvious, but obviously things have changed so much in the last, 26, 27 years that I've been doing this. And I think now, you do have the ability to connect so quickly, which is good and bad. You've seen it come too early for some artists that weren't really ready. And, for some artists, they were able to grab that mantle at the right time. But I just think it's, get it right. Once it's hard to change people's perception once you've tried to get them to pay attention, right? And that goes from, once you're out there trying to get press, or once you're trying to play music for a record label or trying to get booked, So, first impressions still matter a lot. Just because you can change things on a dime and your SoundCloud page could change, with the second song you post or with the photo you post, it's still take time to really develop what you want to be and what you want the world to really, how you want the world to really perceive you.
Right. How do you kind of balance that first impression with artist growth, or, as a music business person with business acumen and business growth,
Well, I think, it's different. It's just, if you're talking about, if you're an artist trying to get out there, versus if you're, a manager, I with an artist, I think, look, everyone, it's hard to be patient. It's hard for me to be patient at 48 years old and having done this for a long time. It's hard to be patient about aspects of my career and life. And, I, as an artist, of course, you're confident in what you're doing, you believe in what you're doing, and you want people to be able to hear it and see it. But I just, be overly confident, go past 2 steps beyond that point to make sure, and test, ask people's opinions that you trust and are close to you. Are they hearing what they're seeing, what you're seeing? I think, it's really just, you only have one shot to get it right the first time, right? You don't only have one shot, period. But once you go send your music to a manager or a record label, they're going to hear it. They're not going to want to hear a song a month later, Then maybe they will. If
Right.
they hear something promising, they might say, keep you posted. But then they're going to want you to come back in a year or two and hear what you've developed. And, I think a lot of mistakes get made, with artists who are, trying to just do too much too fast. And, on a touring side of things, it's like develop things locally and then regionally. Don't try to like go on tour 3 weeks into your career, try to build something, where you're at. That's going to make people pay more attention, like if you have something going on, if you're creating, if you're creating demand. I think with, and it's the same thing, obviously, with distributing your music digitally. Like, don't, if you want to start putting songs up to get them out in the world, put them out in the world, but make sure that when you really try to like push and try to bring a manager on or a booking agent or attorney or a record label, make sure it's really ready. Make sure that, what's going to be interesting to people. I mean, obviously it's going to come down to the quality of the music, but you also want to, like, if you show that people are responding to what you're doing, whether that's selling 150 tickets in your hometown, whether you're getting, X amount of streams per month on your SoundCloud, like that's what's gonna, that this data that wasn't available that long ago is now available, and people are always going to look at it, right, and say, well, someone might take a risk and say, well, I see your song's only been played 8 times, but it's really great. I'm going to help you get it out there. But more often than not, people are going to say, well, I've got this artist who has a great song and no one really seems to be responding, but holy, this artist has, 1.2 million streams on Spotify 100%. Already, like what's going on here? Why are people reacting to it? So I just think as much as you can get done on your own, do it, and be sure you're ready to try to explore expanding the team, and that's it. Because if it doesn't work, and chances are it won't work the first time, but you just don't want to feel like you left anything. You don't want to feel like, I should have waited 3 more months till I had that one other song, or I should have waited till I had, more people listening to my music, or, whatever it is. So,
yeah. There's one person I actually can think of. Sorry, Sam, I know you have a question. There's one person I can think of in my head literally right now who has had this album supposed to come out for like 5 years.
Yeah.
So I totally get, we're all like, oh, he even showed people the intro and we were like, oh man, this is great. It's the only thing we've heard in like 5 years. So totally understand that.
I mean, yes, there is always, and I don't know what's going on with that artist, but yeah, there's also always, of course, the possibility of like overthinking or waiting too long in that, so you also want to trust the people around you on that too. But I just think I would err on the side of caution. Like if you're like, I'm not sure it's quite ready, then you're not sure it's ready. Wait a little bit, So.
Yeah. I mean, in that, when you were kind of speaking through the areas of focus, I mean, you definitely alluded a lot towards really trying to build leverage, create momentum. Yeah. In that vein, like for artists that are building leverage, when does it make sense to actually sign to a label? I know a lot of the market share of like the Billboard Top 100 is still like very heavily dominated by major labels, but I mean, it definitely does feel like there's a bit of a groundswell, and there definitely are a bunch of like mid-tier artists that are doing very well independently. So I'm curious from your perspective, like, at what point does it make sense to actually to partner, and what are kind of things to be very cautious of when doing so?
Well, and I have these conversations with, clients or potential clients. I think it really depends on what the goals are, right? Like the type of label you want to be on, if you need a label. Obviously we're living in this time where you might not even need to be on a record label to make a living, but you do need help in, certain aspects of your career. So it really depends, I mean, obviously there are artists that have not been together very long, and they write, a quote unquote hit song, and it makes sense for them to be on a big record label that can help get that song as much mass exposure as possible. Artists that have more modest expectations, or are thinking of themselves of a slower, growth curve, then it's, makes sense to do a short-term deal with an independent label that's going to dot the I's and cross the T's in a better way. I mean, I think, major labels are, not great at getting runners to second base. They're great getting runners home from second base. Indies are really good. This is a huge generalization, obviously, but indies are really good at getting covering the bases. So it's like the reason to go to Universal Records, and this is no disrespect to Universal Records, isn't because you gradually want to build your career. The reason to go to Universal Records is because you feel like you have a hit song, and Universal Records is as good as anybody of making that song a hit, right? You don't sign to Barsuk Records because you think you have a hit song and you want to have money and boots on the ground for, to get as much mass exposure as possible. So it's really, I'm not like talking around the question, but it really has to do with the goals of an artist. And, for some artists, it might be enough to say, hey, I'm going to set up a Patreon page. And if I can make, $1,500 a month, I'm going to live on that. And I'm going to keep woodshedding until I feel like I need more help. That's great too. I think you just need to really figure out what your career aspirations are and what you need in order to reach those aspirations. And it's the same thing with the manager. A lot of artists are really savvy and they don't need a manager, in the early days. I'm not trying to like talk myself out of a job, but Def Cab, our biggest client, and they've been our biggest client for almost 18 years. They were self-managed for the first 5 years of their career, right? So because they're all smart and they have good heads on their shoulders, and but they got to a point when they realized that they needed, that it was getting too busy and they were entering uncharted territory, and they needed more expertise and they needed help, So.
What do you think has contributed to like such a long and prosperous relationship too? Because I know a lot of times like management is like we had another conversation recently with an entrepreneur, Anthony Martini, runs a record label after he had spent years really on the management side of the business, and he had spent all this time contributing to these like big moments. And oftentimes too, it's like an artist, you help him get to this new frontier. Now it's like, okay, now it's time for me to like level up my manager. But for something like that, where it's been like an 18-year run, like, can you speak to how you've been able to really continue to grow together and really turn that into the partnership it has been?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll first maybe speak a little generally, and then I'll talk more specifically about, my relationship with those guys. I think, generally, a manager-client relationship should be the closest, most intimate relationship that an artist has with his team, and like all relationships, sometimes they just time out. Sometimes the goals of the artist differ from what the manager feels like the goals should be, or doesn't agree with the direction, or the artist wants to go in a direction that the manager is not as suited for. I mean, I've certainly had that come up, with a very long-term client of mine, where it just felt like the direction he wanted to go in, I wasn't the best person to support him in that. And, I think, and that happens. Or sometimes people are like, look, I've been talking to this person for 10 years and starting to feel like maybe I need a fresh perspective. Or a manager might say, look, we're not really seeing eye to eye anymore. It feels like I've taken you as far as I can go, and you should really get someone who has more energy and perspective. That happens too, and yeah, of course, when you're in it, it's hard because you never want to, like all relationships, it's always hard when they end. But I think, speaking to Def Cab, I think, I'm incredibly lucky. I have worked with these guys who are smart and hardworking and loyal and understand the work that goes into maintaining their career. And we see eye to eye, as I should. Sometimes I try to push them, on things that they maybe don't feel like, they're not really feeling. I learn from them sometimes about why those are terrible ideas. But at the end of the day, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. Like, they know they can count on me. They know that I'm honest. They know that I'm hardworking. They know that, they are prioritized. I feel like all of our clients are prioritized, of course, but like they know that if they ask us to do something, we're going to do it. And they know that they're being represented properly. And that's the other thing. You should make sure when you're bringing on, whether it's a manager, an attorney, or anyone who's speaking on your behalf as an artist, make sure that the way they represent you lines up. Some managers are screamers, Like, is that the type of representation you want? It might be fine as long as stuff's getting done. I think, if a band like Death Cab wants to know that things are being done on their behalf, things are being fought for, but that, they're also handled respectfully. And so, I don't know. I mean, I think it's, I can't tell you how fortunate I feel that those guys put their faith in me back in 2003 when I really didn't have a lot going on. And they had much bigger managers to work with, they could have worked with, and that they've stuck with me through all these years, So, and I'm proud of how long that relationship's been. I'm proud of how long we've been managing She and Him for going on 14 years now. We've been working with New Pornographers for 11 years. And even Best Coast now, I feel like we're 7 years in, it's just, we're so fortunate that we have these clients that we enjoy working with and they enjoy working with us,
Right.
Because it is easy to get the grass is always greener syndrome as an artist, right? Like,
especially when you hit those different tiers of your career, like when you have your first #1 record, you're like, oh man, this is crazy. What do I do? Maybe I should get a new manager, maybe I should. That's when things kind of start to change, is when they kind of reach these different levels, I feel like, of stardom. And there's a lot of pressure,
Yeah. And it might be, look, it's also possible that a manager, isn't growing at the same pace as an artist.
Right.
And, artists might look and be like, well, why is that artist getting, making so much more money than me? Or why is that artist, having this much more success? But, at the end of the day, the job of the manager is to work with the artist to achieve their vision and try to get their music in front of as many people as possible so those people can vote on their music and ultimately decide if they want to buy into it or be a fan or stream it. I think, you can, we could be managing 3 artists and tell them all to do the exact same things, and they do it. And one artist winds up really far downhill, and the other 2 are like at the 1 yard line still. And that's just the one thing we can't control is how people react ultimately.
Right.
But, our job is to put our artists in a position for people to react to it.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's all comes down to the court of public opinion. You might think you've got something that's gonna like blow up, but it doesn't, and vice versa. Sometimes we're really surprised by like wow, didn't see that coming. Like we knew this was a great record, but we didn't expect that this was going to be the result. And
right.
So I don't know if that makes sense or that answers the question. But I think really with Death Cab, I think the relationship, it's a really good fit, and that's the other thing I think you have to understand is, as a manager and an artist, like I could be a great manager for a certain band and a terrible manager for another band, and vice versa. You can let an artist could look at me like, I want to be at that management company because they manage X, Y, and Z. And you get there and you're like, this is not how I want to be managed.
That actually kind of leads me like perfectly into my next question, which is it kind of doubling down on that, which is, when does it make sense? Like, what's the perfect discovery process like for an artist and a manager? Because people reach out to managers to be managed. Managers reached out to artists to manage them. What do you think is the most ideal way or a way that precedes a successful relationship? I was going to say, I've had people when I worked in management at my last company send me music repeatedly. I wasn't really into it. And that was kind of just that relationship over and over again. And I feel like, if I was into it, then they had to convince me like so hardcore that maybe I wouldn't be the best manager for that artist. Right. Yeah. But at the same time, like, would I have heard it if they hadn't have sent it to me directly? So like, what do you think is the ideal way for that connection to kind of be built?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways, but I think, the ideal is if you have, the ideal is if there's like the get to know you period, because, that's changed a lot in this day and age because of the internet. And because just, there's a lot of managers, there always have been, but look, there's no school to be an artist manager. You don't have to get a license to be, an artist manager. So anyone could be a manager, which, is good and bad. I feel like, the ideal is if you actually take time as an artist to get to know the person, and as a manager to get to know the artist, because ultimately you want to make sure it's a good personality fit. You want to make sure, like you said earlier, like the value set works, that like what I said in terms of being represented properly. We don't really have that. It's as soon as someone starts getting some attention, there's like a manager pylon. It's like whether it's Pitchfork Best New Music, or it's you're on the Pollen playlist on Spotify, or you're in a TikTok, whatever it is, like all of a sudden there's just going to be tons of, or Twitch, it's just a ton of managers inquiring. So in the ideal world, you would be able to say, like, hey, this sounds interesting. Let's talk. Can I call? Like, can I ask you some questions? Can I, I'm talking to a few managers. I'd love to be able, I'm not in a rush right now. I'd love to be able to like ask you questions as we go. I mean, there's always challenges in that too, because if things start really, like in this world we live in where things could start really happening quickly, you may need to bring someone on very quickly to navigate it. And also the same thing where it's like, that's not a hard and fast rule. If like you, as an artist, you start talking to a manager that you feel like you connect with out of the gates, like same thing as like going on dates, right? Like you might be like, holy, like I've gone on 15 dates and like, wow, this one just like really, I feel like I'm connecting to it. So I just think ideally take your time, take a breath, get to know them, talk. I'm speaking now from the artist side of it, right? Talk to other clients the manager works with. I always offer that up with the potential client, and my clients are always happy to talk, because you're not going to know. Like you want to be able to, talk, so I think, do your research too, and that would be, that would be my main advice is like, I think the best way possible is just, have it, being able to build a rapport. I know that's not always possible. And then if you're not able to build a rapport, I don't suggest, signing a contract immediately. Like do a trial run for both sides, whether,
right.
Say like, hey, this is awesome. Let's work under these parameters for the next 6-9 months, whatever. And everything's going well, then we'll formalize it, type thing, which can be tricky because I won't get into the potential landmines of that, but it's just
right.
Even if it's 3 months, like, so you're talking on the phone with someone every day and you're exchanging ideas, because anyone could give a good meeting or two, and it's easy to wow as a manager. You can wow an artist just by the success of your other artists and giving examples of all this stuff. So I feel like that's, I think patience, that's what I would say. Sorry if you guys just heard my son yell in the background. I don't know if you did.
Yeah, I think, did you say dad?
Yeah, my 13-year-old son.
All good.
Yeah.
We're all working from home. We all understand.
Yeah.
Earlier today, I had a meeting and Amazon rang my doorbell, and I had to be like, I need to get it. I'm so sorry.
It happens to me all the time. I can't tell you how many like deliveries come, and I have a large dog that barks loudly when the doorbell rings. It's like
exactly. It's everybody's used to it. Cool. I guess before we kind of transition to specific stories about some of the artists you work with, I had a conversation with a manager recently, and, we kind of were having a conversation about how managers have to find the money where it doesn't seem like there is money. In addition to the main things like, record sales, merchandise, you also have to make sure that people are signed for PROs and at least have admin deals for publishing, those sort of things. What do you think are some of the revenue sources that are being underutilized by artist managers or artists themselves that they could be completely missing at this moment?
Well, I think all of it. I mean, I think especially now you're just seeing like, we've all like, especially with the manager, the type of artists I work with, without touring revenue, it's rough, but I feel like, these might be some of the more obvious things, but like even merch stores, like I feel like, make sure they're up to date. Make sure you're selling merch. Like, even if it's even if you're like a developing band, it's one t-shirt and one tote bag, like have something up. You don't know, you might make $100 a month on it,
right.
But Yes, it is on the publishing side. Make sure you're registered with Performing Rights Society. Make sure, there are a lot of great, just pretty straightforward, admin collection publishing companies, because look, as an artist or as a manager, you can't pick up every nickel or dime that's sitting out there, and it's not cost you anything other than the small percentage you're paying them. So I feel like, and then, be on the lookout for new streams of revenue. Obviously this whole NFT thing that's going on right now with, it's, a little bit of a bubble, but there are a lot of artists who were really smart and on that early and made a lot of money during a time where artists are not making a lot of money. And now it's becoming a really crowded space very quickly. So just be on the lookout for new opportunities. Make sure you're registered for Sound Exchange. That's an obvious one too, where a lot of artists overlook that. So I don't know if there's anything new in there, but I just think it's easy to get caught up in, the bigger ticket things, but all these smaller ones add up too, And we've certainly seen during the pandemic, some of our artists are doing a more brisk web business, online merchandise business than they ever have, because of people are not spending their money on going out. They're spending money on things that they could bring to their home.
Yeah, no, I love that and totally agree that I was trying to look and make sure that not leaving any of those stones unturned. With that said, when it comes to, I know one of Jordan and I kind of favorite artists or groups on your roster, Toro Y Moi, have some other fans.
Surprised to hear that for some reason.
Yeah. But would really love to hear kind of similar to Death Cab. I mean, kind of what the journey was in initially crossing paths, and then kind of what you feel were some of the core inflection points in their development.
Well, I think with Chaz, aka Toro. Trying to remember when we started working together. I feel like it was, 4 or 5 years ago, which is right. I don't remember exactly what year. Chaz, I was friendly with. He had been living in the Bay Area for a while, and we would cross paths. He had played events for the festival that I'm a partner in, Noise Pop, and we were just friendly. And one of my very close friends was very close with him. He was managed, so I never approached him about management. But then when he was amicably parting ways with his manager actually called me and asked me if I would meet with him. And that's how we started working together. And, we had a bit of a foundation of friendship, but not much. I mean, we knew, he had actually been to my house once before for a photo shoot. My friend shot photos of him here. So he kind of knew me, knew my tastes, and, it's an interesting thing. And I think that
you said he shot a photo shoot at your house?
Yeah. So our mutual close friend is a photographer, and he shot photos at my house for something. And
I just think that's funny because, as you're getting to know your artist, I mean, it's we knew each other. He shot a photo shoot at my house, but I
wasn't here. I wasn't even here when they did it. I was out of town. It's cool, do it. So he knew my tastes. He knew that my interests, he knew I had he thumbed through my record collection. He saw the art hanging on my walls. I think that, that had an impact on him because he's someone who is, beyond just an artist, just a musician. He creates visual art, and he knew that I have a strong interest in visual art as well. So that was kind of how it all came together. And, at the time that we started working with him, his career had, plateaued a little bit, and he was finishing up or about to release Boo Boo, which is a beautiful record, but not one that he wanted to tour on. So it wasn't I'd been a fan for a long time, and I saw the, it wasn't the most obvious moment. You're okay, you start working with an artist who's not going to be touring. You're going to work on a record, and, but it just, I felt and he was saying then that he really was more interested at that point in focusing on his visual art. And he, I felt cool, that's fine. Great. Do what you want to do. At some point, you're going to want to tour again. And I also think like scarcity creates demand. So it's not the worst thing in the world. If you're going to not tour this record, it'll just be that much more impactful when you do tour. And that was the case. I mean, and then he just kind of, the next record was, he continued to be very active in aspects of his career. He did some DJing. He did some press. He was doing art shows. He was, present. And then, Outer Peace came out, and it was the right, it's a great record at the right time.
Yeah.
And really, really, not only re-engaged some fans who maybe peeled off, but also brought in a whole new slew of fans.
I will say, I moved to New York in 2012, and at the time, I listened to So Many Details a lot. So when I hear that song, it reminds me of moving to New York City. So there aren't a lot of artists that have nestled themselves into my memories like that, but So Many Details is one of them, and so is High Living. Both of those together kind of taking this step from Baltimore to go to New York. So I figured I would share that as well.
Oh,
but that's what the best music does, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Not to move off of Toro, but when the Postal Service did the reunion tour in 2013, they had only put out one record, Give Up, in 2003, and no one really understood, including myself at times, to be honest, like, why did they make a follow-up record? I mean, the first one sold 1 million copies, right? Like, it was such this beautiful accident that happened. A record that was made for $5,000 on Sub Pop sold 1 million copies, right? But I certainly, Ben, who's lead singer of Postal Service at Death Cab, for people who don't know, Ben always felt like he didn't want to release another record unless he felt like they could top the first one. Totally great and makes sense. And I think seeing that tour and seeing people at those shows and seeing how that record existed in a time capsule for them, like what you're saying about, those songs correspond to you moving to New York. Because the Postal Service never released anything else, District Sleeps Alone Tonight or Nothing Better or Such Great Heights, like, those are songs people were listening to going to prom or graduating from college, or, it's just that it all made sense to me. Like some records, sometimes one is enough. So anyway, that was a little bit of a diversion from it. But when you said that about those Toro songs, it made me think of that. But I think, with Chaz, all of our artists are incredible artists and interesting, but Chaz is really interesting because everything he does informs his music and vice versa. And so, his visual art informs what he's doing creatively. And he really thinks about his releases, in that way. He'll have a new record, sometime in the next year, let's say. And, he was already thinking about the visual side of it and the marketing side of it before he even finished the record, was kind of coming to mind for him. And that's really exciting. And, he has a lot of confidence in his, he wants to be successful and he wants to keep growing, but he has a lot of confidence. He turns down a lot of opportunities, if he doesn't feel like it's the right time. And, certainly he's fortunate because he's making a nice living and he's, had a good amount of success that he can do that. But there's a lot of opportunities that other artists wouldn't turn down, but he does because he just doesn't feel like it's the right moment or it's not on brand or whatever,
Yeah. I mean, speaking of kind of creating moments, it was interesting, I think, and also staying on brand. There was the Nike shoe collab, which I thought was a really interesting and awesome activation. This is actually coming from one of our a listener in front of the podcast, Drew Nagda, who's actually named his dog Toro.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, from that perspective, his question is really diving into how did that kind of collab come about? And what were some of the decisions that were made kind of along the way to ensure that it did do justice to his artistic integrity? And was that a bit of a battle, or did they make that process very easy?
I'd be lying if I could. We weren't, they reached out, and, and then, we were involved in the initial phase of that deal. And then Chaz really, in his design studio, because he's a small design studio in Oakland, they just ran point with the collaboration. So it wasn't but there were no issues, It was, I think, they knew who he was as an artist, and he explained his vision to them before he got going, and it worked out really well. I thought that collaboration was beautiful too. I really, he did a Vans collaboration last year as well that I thought was really great. So I think he definitely understands that, like balancing, his vision, his artistic vision with what people respond to from him.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, he just did a big merch drop this week on the Toro site, and it's all pretty awesome stuff,
That's awesome. So our turn to do a big tangent, but on the side of what's it called, politics. I know you've been very involved politically.
Yes.
I think from our perspective, I'm personally, and I think Jordan, we've probably resonated on this perspective a little bit too. But one thing for me that is very exciting to me is the cultural influence that artists and music have, right? I think like whether or not people are, they are truly like tastemakers of a lot of cultural values and preferences, and a lot of people are looking up to them. So a lot of the values that people are taking as their own are oftentimes really just kind of things that have been endorsed by the people they look up to. From your perspective, what do you feel are some of the ways in which artists and the music industry as a whole can drive change and drive positive change politically and societally?
Well, I feel like we just saw it. I think it worked. In this, look, we could sit here saying it didn't work if Trump had won, right? But I think that, it's I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. Artists have a bigger megaphone than ever right now because of their socials, right? And because of, the direct communication with fans. And granted, there's so much chatter and noise out there, but especially during the pandemic, you have your fans at home, basically living on screens. It was, you can get your point across. And I think that what really impressed me about, the artists, my clients, which I could speak most about, is like how informed they were and what they knew, what they were comfortable doing. And how they wanted to use their voice. And I found that, with the projects I've done over the years around elections, it's often been about, obviously wanting to have an impact, but what's the low barrier of entry for artists to get in? Because I think getting involved with politics for an artist, especially for the first time, can be very intimidating. Right. So you don't know how to do it. You're worried about what the blowback's going to be. So, I think that, and this isn't really answering your question, and then I will answer your question. I think that, artists, I'm not going to sit here and say artists have a responsibility to stand up for their ideals or talk about politics or talk about social issues. I respect those that do, and I respect those that, that make the choice that they don't want to. I feel like if you have a platform, you should use it. That's my personal opinion, but I have artists who chose to sit out, and not because they didn't have strong opinions, but just they weren't comfortable. And I think it's a process. So what really was, wonderful to me about this election cycle is how many did step up, right? Like that had a lot to lose. You're not, whether you're a fan or not, like Billie Eilish and Taylor Swift have a lot more to potentially lose than, most artists, because their fans are not obviously all Democrats, and they went pretty hard for lobbying for Biden, and that's great. And that's what you want. And that's, it's just, we're in this period of time, and I think this is what happened with Trump as our president. It's like politics has become culture, and vice versa. And certainly with everything that happened last year, with the racist president in office, everything that happened with, with Black Lives Matter, like everyone, I was impressed how people stepped up. Because when I started talking to people, managers and artists in April, when it was clear that Biden was going to be our president-elect, a lot of people were saying they were going to be supportive of getting out the vote, but they were not particularly going to be vocal about supporting Joe Biden. But I think, and I hoped, and you kind of see this, like, seen it before, but as we got closer to the election, artists, the stakes become more clear, and artists, and artists for the most part stepped up, and that was great. And I think whether your comfort level is, posting a get out the vote sticker on your Instagram story, or it's, writing an op-ed, or it's talking to your fans, like whatever you're comfortable doing is great, but at the end of the day, like, young people have not been participating in the political process enough. And I think now what we're seeing, and I think that was the silver lining, I know I'm rambling, sorry guys. The silver lining Trump being elected to me in 2016 was, I felt like it was an opportunity for young people to really understand the stakes of elections, and that each vote does count, right? And I feel like that happened. Other things happened too. Terrible things happened that, upped the ante. But now I feel like, and I hope that we don't slide into, because we now have a Democratic president, et cetera, hope we don't all like slide into, it's okay that we're all taking a break. Everyone's taking a break right now that needs to take a break and taking a deep breath, but we can't slide back into thinking that our voices don't matter and that voting isn't important, because we just saw that it is. And the reality is, without COVID, without George Floyd, without, Brianna, without it, on and on and on, like, Trump's reelected. Like, that's the rub here, right? Like, that guy would have walked into a second term. He almost won with all that. So, I mean, it just shows how, if we really want to see change in this country, how important it is for us all to be engaged. I don't know.
Right.
Long rambling answer. And artists,
good.
Okay, and artists' role in that is artists shape culture. At the end of the day, artists have the ability to engage. They have the ability to make people think about things, and they have a larger platform than most. And most artists, no disrespect to actors at all, but like, look, I mean, a lot of artists, if Beyonce says something, if Bruce Springsteen says something, it's going to carry more weight than Brad Pitt saying something. It just, so.
Right.
That was a very, very long answer when I don't even know if I actually answered the question.
No, you did. I feel like music just invades the psyche in a different way than like film and TV does. Like I didn't watch them. I don't watch a movie every time. Like, I didn't watch a movie after I got back from prom, but I definitely listened to music on the way there. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just different. Speaking of, I kind of want to go over what your personal relationship was with politics when you were part of the Entertainment Advisory Committee, and what that actually is, what's the process of being chosen, and kind of like the responsibilities you had there.
With the one in 2012, which was, Barack Obama's second term, I was invited. I had, a former manager was working for the Obama campaign, and who I was friends with. And I believe that's how I got invited, because of my past political work. I had been involved in politics starting in 2004. Not to bore everyone with the details of that, but, since 2004, I've been doing these projects with each presidential election cycle with the author Dave Eggers, and I had been doing projects. And I think that was part of it, is, knew that I had been politically active, and, you want to round out the committee with different types of managers with different relationships. So, really the role is you're there as a resource. It's almost like being on an advisory board of a company. Like, you might get nothing might do nothing for 3 months, and then all of a sudden you get a call of like, hey, we're trying to get in touch with Pearl Jam and we don't have a great relationship with management. Do you mind calling, making an intro? Or, hey, what do you think of this idea? We're trying to, we've got a fundraiser or a rally in Boulder, Colorado. What band do you think would be appropriate for it? It could be that type of thing. It could be more strategy of like, we're having a hard time, and this happened in 2012. We're having a hard time creating urgency within the music community around the election. And that was one of the things we tried to help solve. And, you know,
that's super cool. That's super cool.
Yeah. So, so it depends. And, you know, Hillary's in 2016 was, you know, I think I got invited by my past work, and it's kind of the same. You know, you kind of, you know, I think there were some pretty, you know, and I've had these conversations with Hillary's staff, and I was able to have these conversations with, you know, with Biden's team, because there were some of the same people, like mistakes I thought were made in 2016 about not being inclusive enough, thinking that like all you need is Shawn Mendes and Katy Perry, you know, like I think it's, you know, you have to be, it's really important to include young artists and artists across the spectrum who maybe have a fraction of the fan base, but, you know, people really look at them as leaders. So that was it. You know, I mean, that's really it, you know, as far as it's really, it's an honor to serve on both of those.
I imagine that's very fulfilling work.
It is. But, you know, the other side of it is like, I feel like any of the work that I've done outside of the actual campaigns have actually, look, been more impactful. Like, look, we raised, you know, projects I worked on raised $750,000 this last election cycle. You know, they weren't affiliated with the campaigns. You know, they were certainly pro Biden and pro get out the vote. But, you know, there's also when you are working with a campaign, you are up against you know, bandwidth issues, like what they can actually do and not do, like what they're capable of doing, and everything has to be vetted too. So it can be a really long, arduous process. You could start a conversation like the Team Joe Sings thing we did. That conversation started in June. We didn't launch it until August. You know, so and then at the time we launched it, the campaign was so busy, it was hard to get attention from the digital team. So we didn't feel like it was being accurate, you know, like it wasn't being as promoted as well as it could be. So you're just, you know, those are the things you're going to run up against if you're dealing with a campaign, because a campaign has much, you know, frankly, much bigger fish to fry than, you know, making sure that X artist's performance is being promoted on the socials. So cool.
That's awesome. Just kind of wanted to definitely go through that a little bit for people that weren't aware that being involved in politics and music in the way that you have so explicitly is an option. So thank you for going through that. Want to thank you for coming on to the podcast today. You know, I told you before the episode that we didn't do a lot of your history justice, and I still feel that way because I still want to keep going. But you know, very glad that we could get through management talk, politics talk, and you know, labels and such. So, you know, super glad that you were able to come out and provide insight on those fields for us.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully, I know I talked a lot, but hopefully it was insightful. It's all
good. We are interviewing people. So,
I know, but you know, sitting here like drinking coffee, good. Just stuck in my home talking. So, but you know, sweet. Yeah, hopefully it was helpful, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing and giving people the opportunity to learn about this business, because it can seem like, I know, even as, you know, when I was trying to get into it, it just, you know, seems like can seem like there's you know, a big curtain that needs to be pulled back.
Yeah,
and really intimidating trying to get in. And you know, the last thing I'll kind of say to that end is, you know, I didn't have any relationships in the music business before I started. I don't have any family. There was no nepotism. So I just kind of figured out this is what I wanted to do and tried to do it, you know, by interning and writing articles about it, meeting people and booking shows on campus. And, you know, I know it can be intimidating, but it's all possible, you know, like you just have to find your way in.
Right.
I love that.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Jordan. Really appreciate the time today, man. Keep up the great work.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Really appreciate you having me on again. And having me on for the first time, but
we'll bring you back, man. We'll bring you back.
I'm happy to come back. Let me know.
All right. Thank you, man. Damn. Well, really enjoyed that episode with Jordan Kurland. Also somewhat enjoyed the other Jordan. No, I'm playing Jordan. I enjoyed your presence and co-hosting as well, man. But yeah, no, I think Jordan Kurland has accomplished a lot. Jordan Williams and I were talking about this kind of after, but the notion of how there's just this side of, he has a unique temperament about how he carries himself. He's obviously a very successful person, but he's not this like loud ass Sam Heisel. Like he's a very like calm, and I think I could very easily see how that actually provides a very nice relief and sense of support and guidance and care to the artists on his roster. So that actually kind of stood out to me on the other end of this episode. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah. I mean, like you said earlier, his temperament it goes to show how, I feel like there's confidence and experience, and that's how you get to that. When I first joined the music industry, when I was, as an intern, I was 19, but working full time, I was 22. And, me and you both definitely drank the Kool-Aid of being spazzes and being super hyped for no reason and getting stress and anxiety just because. And he spoke with a lot of confidence and a lot of poise and a lot of grace. And it's really awesome also to see him follow his passions outside of music and incorporate that into his career. Working on campaigns, almost as a music consultant. I think that's really awesome. And I think hopefully it'll give people inspiration to do the same with other hobbies and with other passions that they can bring into their careers in music. Yeah,
totally. Love it. Well, thank you as always, everybody, for tuning in. Really appreciate you. Hope y'all out there getting it. The bag ain't gonna get itself. But on that note, we out. We'll talk soon.